that he said about immigrants in a monologue. Here's the mainstream media's take on over at MSN.com. 16 advertisers have now dropped Tucker Carlson tonight after the Fox News host said in his show last Thursday that immigrants to the United States made the country poorer and dirtier. Now, notice poorer is a quote, and is not, and then dirtier is in a separate quote. So that would be what we call in the business cherry picking. Over at the Daily Caller, their interpretation says that it's no secret that at least some Tijuana residents have criticized the migrant caravan, yet Tucker Carlson's echoing of their exact same sentiments has led to a wide backlash among advertisers. Following a vicious campaign from anti-First Amendment leftist organizations known for stifling dissenting opinion, at least 10 advertisers have opted not to place ads on Tucker Carlson's show. These organizations cherry-picked quotes from Carlson's monologue and sprinted to mischaracterize them. Let's see here. Keep going. There's just one problem. He was talking about illegal immigrants in Tijuana, not immigrants in general, and local residents there share his opinion. According to the Chicago Tribune article, Tijuana residents took to the streets to protest the caravan, accusing, quote, the migrants of being messy, ungrateful, and a danger to Tijuana. They also complained about how the caravan forced its way into Mexico, calling it an invasion. Take that, Jim Acosta. Let's see here. What else? The statements that led the organizations to pulling their ads came during Carlson's opening monologue. So what did he actually say last Thursday? Quote, he said this: it's obvious that we need more scientists and skilled engineers, but that's not what we're getting. Instead, we're getting waves of people with high school educations or less. Nice people, no one doubts that. But as an economic matter, this is insane. It's indefensible, so nobody even tries to defend it. Instead, our leaders demand that you shut up and accept this. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor. They tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer, dirtier, and more divided. Interesting sentiments there from Tucker Carlson. And the left takes that, really just asking good, honest questions. And it's something that we need to have a debate about in society. And they don't want to have the debate. They shut it down. The show starts in 5 seconds.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, folks. Welcome. It is hour number one here, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. So glad that you are with us today. Man, I got to tell you, kind of following up on what, Tucker Carlson, we were just talking about Tucker Carlson. He's taken a lot of heat because he had in his monologue, I guess a week ago, he wanted to have an honest conversation. And essentially, the premise was, he was asking tough questions. Would we rather have in our country skilled engineers or in doctors and things like that when it comes to an immigration policy, or would we rather people have a high school education or less coming here? Now, in today's politically correct society, you can't even ask that question. And it's not a matter of hurting someone's feelings. It's not a matter of, discrimination in the terms that we like to think of it here is the rights that you have when you're an American citizen. We're not talking about American citizens. We're talking about an immigration policy. We're talking about the idea that we have the ability in this country to control or set, we have the ability to control who comes here. And, it's an economic matter. It's an economic matter. It's not well, let me just read you his statement again. Let me read you what got him in trouble. He says, it's obvious that we need more scientists and more skilled engineers, but that's not what we're getting. Instead, we're getting waves of people with high school educations or less. Nice people, no one doubts that. But as an economic matter, this is insane. It's indefensible, so nobody even tries to defend it. Instead, our leaders demand you shut up and accept this. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer, dirtier, and more divided. So that has the mainstream media saying that Tucker Carlson called immigrants poorer and dirtier. And that has they've taken those statements and they have just, they've convinced, I think, 16 advertisers now to bail from Tucker Carlson's show, which, by the way, is really, really good. He goes on, what's so amusing, though, is that nobody ever bothered to explain any of these rules to the people of Tijuana. Tijuana is in Mexico, which means they're Mexican citizens. And by academic definitions popular in this country, they must be oppressed. Nobody on the American left ever imagined that the people of Tijuana would display the classic symptoms of white privilege. And yet, when a caravan of Honduran immigrants showed up in their city uninvited, that's exactly what they did. He goes on. They want us to mouth the empty platitudes and move on. Nothing to see here. Shut up and go away. Those who won't shut up get silenced. You've seen it a million times. It happens all the time. The enforcers scream racist on Twitter until everybody gets intimidated and changes the subject to the Russia investigation or some other distraction. It's a tactic, a well-worn one. Nobody thinks it's real, and it won't work with this show. We are not intimidated. We plan to try and say what's true until the last day. Then Carlson went on. The truth is unregulated mass immigration has badly hurt this country's natural landscape. Take a trip to the southwestern deserts if you don't believe it. Thanks to illegal immigration, huge swaths of the region are covered with garbage and waste that degrade the soil and kill wildlife. The Arizona Department of Environmental Quality estimates that each illegal border crosser leaves 6 to 8 pounds of trash during their journey into the country. Daily Caller says that Tucker's claims that immigrants make a country dirtier was not the first time he's discussed the mess the caravan is making. Okay, so anyway, they really are cherry-picking his comments here. But isn't it refreshing to have to speak the truth, at least to try to have a debate about what some of the issues are, what the reality is, not the perception that the left wants, like he was saying. They tell us that we have a moral obligation to take these people in, even if it makes our country weaker and less prosperous, even if it's going to take wages away or drive wages down and make labor in America much, much cheaper. We have an obligation. And think about this for a second. Why do we have immigration laws? That's what's being lost here in the first place. We have the laws on the books. Now, you could make the argument that one of the reasons we decided to have a law, immigration law, that says we don't have an open border policy is to protect, not only the country's physical borders, but to protect our economy, to protect wages and a whole lot of other stuff that's like packaged into a very, into the very, very broad issue, but the main issue that our government was formed, which was to protect the country. It's just incredible to me. But anyway, so Tucker Carlson definitely under fire, and we'll see what happens. But I just think it's, you read, obviously, Tucker Carlson started the Daily Caller years ago. You read the story, though, And what he was actually talking about was the Chicago Tribune article that quoted Tijuana citizens as being very upset with the caravan because it's making their community worse. And he's saying, wow, these Mexican citizens are displaying white privilege, aren't they? Because they're upset with illegal immigration. They were also upset with their own government when Mexico offered them asylum. Of course, they didn't take it because they wanted to continue to flee from danger. But the mainstream media just straight up says, oh, he called immigrants poor. He said that immigrants make America poorer and dirtier, and so people are running with that. Definitely. I mean, there's no. I mean, why do you? The truth is so. The one guy here, he's telling the truth, and people hear it, and they try to silence him. I mean, that's because we are so far apart. We're using completely different languages. It's very, very worrisome, if you ask me. Okay, the telephone number, 870-275-9799. If you want to call or text this morning, you can do that. We do have a great show for you. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with the Patriots of Act 746, John Calvin Martin. It's always great to have him on the program. And then at the bottom of the next hour, how many people, I mean, I'm guilty of this. We look at our phones all day, don't we? We look at our tablets all day. We look at a screen all day. Now, I didn't grow up doing that. I didn't have a cell phone until I was sometime in high school, the later years of high school, and it was like one phone. It was the Nokia, brick phone. The only thing that you could use it for was that they had a game on it, Snake. Remember the Snake game, where it was just a little snake that you know. That's the only thing it had on it, and so it wasn't even these LCD screens. You know, it was just I don't know. That's the only phone I had, and it wasn't even mine until I think after high school. I think I was sharing it with my sisters, and if one of us went somewhere, you know, you took the third phone, you took the cell phone somewhere in case you needed it. It was only really for emergency purposes. That's how I grew up, you know. And that's not the truth. That's not the truth now for kids, though. Kids, you know, they're looking at these screens constantly. They're being used as babysitters constantly. So we're going to be talking to Dr. Warren Farrell. We're going to be talking to Dr. Warren Farrell. He is the author of a book called The Boy Crisis, Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It. He's also currently the chair, the chair of the commission to create a White House Council on Boys and Men. And so we will call Warren, and we're going to talk about this concept that the technology is actually replacing the mother and father. 7+ screen hours may cause a prematurely thinner cortex. And it's just fascinating to me. You know, as somebody who's now a dad of a toddler. I mean, you read these articles where the people who are making this stuff won't let their kids use it. Now, how weird is that? So let's just talk a little bit about that. And we'll do that at 7:33 this morning. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit more lighthearted, shall we? I saw this article, and many of you who know me or have been following the show for a while, you know I have some proclivities when it comes to science fiction, specifically Star Trek. I'm a big fan of Star Trek, and William Shatner is obviously always refreshing. He has a new album out. It's called Shatner Clause, so you can get that. I saw his Instagram post on that. But recently he's been speaking of truth, he's been speaking truth that the media, the political correct totalitarians don't want you to hear. William Shatner laments that the Me Too movement has gotten out of hand and complains that he can no longer tell women they have great legs. Wow. I mean, that is spoken like a guy who's running around the Enterprise chasing women. To me, that's what it seems like. Anybody ever watch? I mean, I have. I've watched all the episodes of the original Star Trek series, and it's fantastic. You know, it's great. A wagon train to the stars every week, every episode, and he's running around. You know, he's with this alien woman, and you know, it's that aspect of the series is what really makes William Shatner legendary in a lot of ways. And so he's been out there defending the Christmas classic, Baby It's Cold Outside, lamenting the Me Too movement. Listen to some of these quotes here. And I think he makes some really good points. Quote, "You're not saying I'm closing the door and you can't leave. It's not force, it's verbal persuasion." Can you just hear William Shatner saying this? It's verbal persuasion, which works in the act. Now, let me just stop right there. That is so offensive. I mean, if you're a leftist, that is so offensive. But I think if you'll just, you know, stop and think a little bit about the interactions between men and women, and I've said this before, there is a natural pursuit that takes place, and it just is the way it is. I mean, you know, it's not force. It's persuasion. Shatner continued. In 2018, we have the Me Too movement, which I think is great, that these hidden forces are exposed and not be allowed, and women have equal rights. I've got 3 daughters. I'm all for that, he says. But if you look back at things that were written, say, 20 to 30 years ago, it's a different context. And you've got to judge it. You've got to judge it by that context. Rape and pillage? Absolutely not. Those are crimes against humanity. But saying, "Would you make love with me?" and the opposing party says yes or no, I can't fathom what's wrong with that, he says. Now, I mean, it's what's crazy is that this is wildly offensive. This is, you know, the left is going to say, "Oh, that's William Shatner. He's just some old white man." Things aren't like that anymore. Really? Is that true? I don't think it's true at all. I think we are, you know, we as a society, we are ignoring the majority of what people think. I mean, the majority of people actually, I think, would agree with William Shatner in this country. But in Hollywood, in our pop culture, in the mainstream media, they would have us believe that this is not true. That somehow we're all backwards savages. He goes on. It's like saying would you have dinner? Would you like to write a song with me? Would you do an interview? I'm not insulted by you asking me to do an interview. Maybe it's my mindset based on the years I've lived. But I'm trying to be fair, and I don't see the problem. I've tweeted about it just to get it out there and have some fun with the people who think differently. On my part, there's no animosity, just a difference of opinion. Let's see here. He says the Me Too movement as a whole has, he suggested that it's, quote, "it's become hysterical. I've got 3 daughters, and I'm glad they have more opportunity. At the same time, it's become hysterical. It's the whole new culture. The whole business has changed. The whole man-woman relationship has changed to a severe degree." Shatner continued, "It's all about sensitizing you to what is harassment. You might say, as I have on numerous occasions, 'Looking good. Wow, what a great dress. Great legs. I love your hair.' Nothing grabby, touchy-feely, nothing sexual. Just innocuous compliments that one might say to anybody with no intent of lasciviousness." The miscongeniality star explained. "People say, 'Can I put my arm around you?' I say, 'Yes, of course, but I don't. I've changed my behavior to quite a degree because it's a revolution." It is a revolution right now, but it's not one that I want to see. I definitely don't want to see them win. You know what I mean? And again, I think it's a mentality that just really isn't realistic. It's some weird perception they're trying to advance that's not actually the truth about how men and women react or men and women live their daily lives. Just my thoughts. What do you think? What do you think about the Shatner clause and his comments on women? You can sound off on our Facebook page right now, facebook.com/Conduit News. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. We're going to take a break and return after that break here in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. I want to introduce you to a man by the name of Jim Hester. Jim is the author of a book called Two Tribes. I've got the Amazon link here pulled up. Two Tribes, Rebuilding Team America in a Post-Truth World. Jim, welcome to Conduit News Radio. How are you this morning?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Now, is it, we were looking at the area code. Are you live over in the West Coast, right? So is it 5:30 where you are right now?
It is, yes.
Well, thank you for getting up so early for us. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
So tell us a little bit about your book. What's it about? Why did you write it?
Well, it's an examination of the partisanship in our country that's dividing and harming our nation. I have 4 children. I'm concerned about their future. There's always been partisanship in the United States going back.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Randy on Facebook writing that William Shatner is trying to wake people up to the fact that we live in an alternate reality and we need to open our eyes and fight back with reality. Randy, I think you may be right. I don't think a guy like William Shatner, I mean, he's not really looking for any more work. You know, he's got his fan base out there. He knows his album, Shatner Claus, is going to sell well by people who want to listen to William Shatner, you know. It's a rocket man. Rocket Man. Anyway, so that's that story. Let's see, what else do we have here for you? Oh man, people really upset about Trump and him moving forward with banning bump stocks. Now, what they're saying is that he's banning bump stocks based on the machine gun law that says you can't have a machine gun or machine gun. That's how they're going to ban it. They're like, hey, they're saying that, hey, a bump stock is turning it into a machine gun, and that's not the case. That's just not true. I don't know. I don't know who is in the president's ear on this. It's really, really sad. It's disappointing. because, fundamentally it is less freedom, when it comes to being able to have type of weapon you want to have. And so, yeah, I think it's ridiculous, quite frankly. Very disappointing, no doubt about it. And then you talk to some people who don't care, and they may claim to be for the Second Amendment and don't care, but I just know, it's all incremental. I mean, what we're fighting is, the incremental stripping or diminishing of our freedoms, and they got to get rid of the Second Amendment if they want to do more. You know what I'm saying? And so bump stocks are going to be banned, it looks like, unless something changes. But a lot of people are upset about it, and I am too. I'm just, real disappointed. Real disappointed. On the other side of things, there's a bipartisan agreement passed the Senate, the criminal justice reform, which was something that President Trump's son-in-law has been working on to try to reduce sentencing, giving judges more leeway in drug sentencing, like, nonviolent offenders and that sort of thing. Apparently will even reduce the sentences of people who are already behind bars in some instances. This was vigorously opposed by Senator Tom Cotton, our senator here in Arkansas. And then you had an amendment, I guess, he tried to submit that senators claimed would have been a poison pill and would have actually hurt the bipartisan agreement that they had. Senator Cotton's amendments were rejected, and they went forward and passed the bill anyway. There were only 12 votes that were no votes on this. So, I mean, it's a pretty big deal that this is, and of course, I think a lot of people, this won't get any coverage. The fact that President Trump gets an 87-12 vote, the Senate overwhelmingly passing criminal justice reform. Now, you would think, right, the mainstream media, they're always about bipartisanship. You'd think they'd talk about this all weekend, right? Because they've finally gotten what they always claim they want. But for some reason, we know what they're going to do, right? They're going to, kind of mention it out of the side of their mouths, and then they're going to say that Trump is a KKK, Nazi, KGB agent. That's what they're going to do.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome, folks, to the program for the first time. I want to introduce you to Mr. Justin A. Torres. He is a D.C.-based attorney, and he is a member of the Federalist Society. He has represented parties in high-stakes civil and criminal matters in the United States Supreme Court, federal courts of appeals, state Supreme Courts. He's been named a rising star by super lawyers in Washington, D.C. Hey, Justin, welcome to the program, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to have you on because I understand you've been following this census question. Is that correct? They're going to add a question on the census as to whether or not, are you a citizen or are you not a citizen?
That's right. They're going to ask a question for everyone who responds to the census. Is this person a U.S. citizen? And if they're a naturalized citizen, what year were they naturalized?
Okay, yeah. Sorry, Justin. We're having just a little bit of trouble hearing you, so if you could just speak right into your microphone, yes, that's much better. The Supreme Court, they're going to hear arguments on this. Is that right? Because of obviously anything that happens at this point, somebody's going to sue somebody, right?
That's right. The court is going to hear arguments in February on a somewhat narrow question about whether the plaintiffs in all of these cases that are challenging the census question can get the deposition of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. And that's actually, it's a really unusual circumstance. Normally in what are called administrative law cases where you're dealing with, what is a federal agency doing, the court relies on the written record of the agency's decision-making process, and there's no depositions or questioning of agency officials or anything like that. But the judge in that New York case said that he thought there was evidence that even though there was an explanation that was given by Commerce Secretary Ross about why he chose to include this question, that he felt there was evidence that that wasn't the real reason, and that there was a hidden racially tinged or racially discriminatory reason. And so he's allowed that deposition to go forward, and the court's going to hear whether or not they've stated, and they're going to hear argument on whether or not they're going to allow that deposition to go forward. But I also expect that just the question generally, like the merits question of whether the Trump administration has the power to add this question to the census, is going to be before the court before too much longer.
Mm. So what do you think they're afraid of? I mean, why are people suing? I mean, you think it's about the districts and what they might look like if we have an accurate depiction of how many United States citizens we have in our country?
Yeah,
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Hey, welcome back to the program with the Patriots of X 746. We have Mr. John Calvin Martin is with us. John, thanks for coming back on, sir.
Hey, good morning, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing fantastic. You getting excited about the celebration of Christmas coming up?
Man, I celebrate year-round. That's just always a good thing for
Amen.
me.
Yeah.
Not to be politically incorrect, but I listen to Baby It's Cold Outside in July.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there we go. Well, you know, John, I really appreciate you coming on as always, and I also appreciate the great work that the Patriots of X 746 have done and are continuing to do. Folks, you need to check them out. They're on a mission to educate you and others about your gun rights, not just generally, but also specifically right here in Arkansas. We are a constitutional carry state. Things that, you know, y'all have been saying this for a long time. It keeps getting reaffirmed, and, court decisions and judicial opinions and everything else, and yet we still have our leaders that are a little shy about admitting what the state of Arkansas's gun laws actually are.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Paul. I think at last count, we are 6 for 6 here in the state of Arkansas. 6 different cases have come up where constitutional carry has been a question, and we have won all 6 of them. And it's obvious that the only gray area is when our elected officials make those statements that, well, it's just a gray area. That's the only gray area there is. So I'm wondering if the legislation that has been voted, not all, but some, do their best to keep it shady so that they can, well, there's always a reason. You know, as you say, have said more than one time, follow the money.
Yep.
That's kind of where it's at. But, you know, we're 16,000 plus strong here in the state of Arkansas now, the POA is. Man, it's just an exciting time in the state of Arkansas, and that's just all there is to it. I know
agree.
If you look around, you might be like Paul the Apostle said, if I had hope in this world only, I'd be being most miserable. But really, it's an exciting time because we are headed in the right direction. We have got some key players that are in legislature that are really on our side and doing a great job. By no means are we against the government. That's not it at all, but we would like to hold the feet to the fire.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've got to, I think we've got to be cautious. There's
right.
some bills out there getting support. We just got to make sure. It's very easy to slip an amendment in here or there that can end up drastically changing the rights of the people. And let me ask you: are you concerned about that, John?
Yes, sir. There's some legislation coming up. We've already heard several bills that are going to try to be brought to the table this next session that is concerning to us. Again, not scared, not worried, just concerned.
Just watching.
Right. We're watching. One of the first ones we caught wind of was SB 15, and you know, it up front looks like a good bill. Man, who wouldn't want to cut the concealed handgun license, you know, carry price up to 50%? I mean, that just makes good sense. But is it a Trojan horse? That's where we're worried.
Yeah.
And
you just gotta watch
worried.
it. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And that's we're not against it. We're not per se for it. We're just watching it because, man, again, who wouldn't want to pay less for a right?
Yeah, I agree.
Did I say that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not. It's a yeah. Well, at this point, and I've been trying to say this, the Arkansas State Police should embrace 746, and they should start advertising the license as a reciprocity license. If you want to conceal carry in other states,
right.
You don't need it for here. But and that's
right.
And people would do that, and other states have done that. That have
Sure.
constitutional carry. Other states have started to market their license to the people as a way to be able to protect yourself and your family when you go outside of the state. And I think that is a constructive winning solution. But what you're saying, John Calvin Martin, is like, yes, it's a good thing. Let's cut the concealed carry license in half. And I just want everybody to know, right now, we already have articles that have been written. There are news reports about this specific piece of legislation, and it does seem good. Who doesn't want to have that license cut in half? I think it'd be a good idea. However, now that the articles have been written, and now that the publicity has been done, it can always be referred to as this is the bill that's going to cut concealed carry licenses in half, and wouldn't the fee? Don't you want that? And the governor himself, I think, is committed to signing it at this point in the article. So where we are now is actually a perfect scenario to start amending it and turning it into maybe something else, and so that's why we just have to do our due diligence, and we have to watch, because see, every bill in the text of it, it says, to cut the concealed carry license in half and for other purposes. Every one of the bills that they write down there always says in the title, and for other purposes, because that gives people the ability to amend the bill and cover other purposes. And so that's what we have to worry about and watch, because we have, John Calvin, a healthy American skepticism of government. Don't we, John? Did we lose John? Well, I guess we lost John. John Calvin Martin, can you hear me, sir? All right, let's try to get John back on. It seems like we lost him in my long rambling. But that is something you've got to watch for. I just kind of laid that scenario out because I've seen it before, okay? You have the bill. You get the initial title. You get the initial text of the bill. It's something that everybody agrees with. And then from that point, we might have lost our phone. Did we lose our phones? Okay. You get the bill. You get the text. It's something that we all agree on. You have the positive publicity. And then now we can start to, put in little amendments there. And and John Calvin, we got you back. John, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the point of the matter is Act 746, constitutional carry, exists, and we know in this day and age that there may be people who are hostile to that, correct?
Most definitely are.
And so that's why we're doing our due diligence, and we're just going to watch every piece of legislation that comes through.
That's exactly right. Paul, that brings us to a transition I would like to talk to you about a new organization that we have here that is called Arkansas Liberty Coalition. We have actually, the founders of POA 746 have got together and realized that we, just as we are wanting to protect our Second Amendment right with POA 746, we have decided to branch out into the whole Constitution, and we have made a Arkansas Liberty Coalition, which is going to be a constitutional organization to protect our rights. And we're going to do the same due diligence with the whole Constitution that POA is doing for 746. That's for our Second Amendment right. It is an exciting time in the state of Arkansas, brother. I'm telling you, we're headed in the right direction. We are excited about the things that need to go on and have gone on behind the scenes, and we're coming out now more into the public with this Arkansas Liberty Coalition. It's absolutely going to be an awesome thing for the state of Arkansas.
And
Did I catch you completely off guard there? Sorry.
No, not at all. I actually, definitely been following that. It was, I guess, we first heard about this during the Forest City situation, where you had the Forest City Police Department not knowing what the law is and they were going to charge a man. I know they're not anymore because I think they figured it out. But I know that there was a lot of support for it when it was announced, and so that's very, very positive. John Calvin Martin. Hey, can you real quick? We're also got to watch out for these red flag laws. A lot of people think that they are inevitably coming to Arkansas, but I know you would beg to differ.
Well, the reason I would beg to differ, Paul, is because of the POA 746, the Arkansas Liberty Coalition. We're doing our due diligence to make sure these things don't happen. It's been inevitable for them to try, I guess, since the beginning. You know, anytime you have a conservative base, you're going to have people against that. And so you're always going to have somebody trying to slip something in. Again, the Trojan horse syndrome. But we are dedicated to the state, to the people of Arkansas, to do our best to make sure that we get to live in a constitutional state. You know, everything has been founded on the Constitution, and everything should have to pass that muster. Now, our state says that they do, but, of course, we know different than that. And it's our duty, it is our responsibility to do everything we can to make sure that our state legislators, good, bad, and ugly, live by the Constitution. That is our right. That is what we're supposed to do. And it's our desire to make sure everybody that goes up there to pass a law, to vote on a law, understands the Constitution must be upheld. Bottom line, no two ways about that, and we're not backing up on that. The Arkansas Liberty Coalition is being founded for that very reason. And anybody that would like to give to and help this program, for this, I want to say, this wave of conservatism, constitutionalism, can give on our webpage, by the way, also. We're also bringing in Chris Ann Hall in February.
That's what I was about to ask. I was about to ask. I know y'all are really excited about that. I mean, I interviewed Chris Ann a couple weeks ago, and man, she's a really good teacher. You can tell she was just born to teach and educate.
Phenomenal, yes, sir. And basic Constitution stuff. It is just awesome. Somebody, dumb like me can even get what she's saying. I mean, it's just pretty phenomenal that she can. She's not only a constitutionalist, but she's a constitutional attorney. And man, that's heavy right there. Brother, there's so many good things coming to the state of Arkansas. I am excited. We are just so excited.
That's good. Well, it's certainly good to hear some positive news, and
absolutely.
And so, when is Chris Ann Hall coming to Arkansas? She's coming in February, right?
February the 18th through the 24th. Yes, sir.
And she's basically going on tour. Yeah, she's going on tour in the state. Wow. Well,
that's correct. She'll be all over the place.
Now, do you need tickets for this thing?
No, sir. It is just going to be open to the public, and I think they will be taking up some expense offerings or things like that. Of course, I'm a pastor, so everything's offered to me. But love offerings.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so hey, it's Christmas. It's Christmas, John Calvin Martin. As a pastor, what are you preaching to your congregation right now?
You know what? I'm preaching pretty much the same thing I do the other Sundays, Paul. The love of Christ, the reason Jesus came. I mean, that's something I do 365 a year anyway. So my message really doesn't change. All that changes in mine is that we need not to get caught up in the commercialism of it and remember the real gift of the season.
Yeah, I think that's
It's not about presence, it's about his presence.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, well, John Calvin Martin, we sure appreciate you coming on the program as always. God bless you and your family, and Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Same to you, my friend. Happy New Year.
All righty, Happy New Year. Folks, it's the
Thank
Patriots
you,
of X746. You go to Facebook.com, you search for the Patriots of X746, and they are on a mission to educate everybody out there about your gun rights, specifically here in Arkansas, about constitutional carry and defending liberty, not just for your gun rights, but liberty in general. Look them up and ask to become a member of the group today. We've got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Question, the argument that a lot of opponents of adding this question make is that if you ask this question, non-citizens, illegal immigrants in the United States are not going to answer because they're going to fear enforcement. They're going to fear that that's going to reveal their illegal status and they're going to be deported. So they won't answer, therefore they won't be counted in the head count, and therefore they won't be counted for purposes of redrawing the district line. And a lot of people don't realize that in the United States today, congressional district lines are based on total population and not on citizen population. So the non-citizens are being counted for purposes of congressional representation. And that, after the 2010 census, it was estimated that there were something in the neighborhood of about 4 to 8 seats, several of them in California,
the name of
Texas,
public
and Arizona.
safety, order. This meeting of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards is called to order in the name of public safety. What's on the agenda for the day?
We have before us today, per our summons, a representative from the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing cosmetology, cosmetologist, and all things hair care and beauty.
Right. Of course, I remember this. In the name of public safety, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and thank you for appearing before us today.
Yes, my name is Cosmo Glamour Gazette, and I'm here in response to a letter our state board received claiming we're in violation of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards. In the letter, you claim that our licensing board is in violation of your rules and regulations because we have failed to, quote, pay tribute, end quote, and therefore have not been granted a license by the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing licensing boards to, quote, shake down the Arkansans who have an interest in cosmetology, end quote.
In the name of public safety, order. Yes, Miss Gazette, we sent you that letter because you have not obtained our approval in the form of a license from our board to distribute licenses to the professional class your board strives to protect. In the name of public safety, of course.
Of course.
So, in the name of public safety, and just so we can get this for the record, you do admit and agree with our board, the Arkansas State Licensing Board, governing state licensing boards, that you have not obtained a license, thereby revealing your board of cosmetology to be operating outside our rules, regulations, and authority?
Well, sir, I'm not sure our board agrees that we need a license from your board to continue to shake down, to look out for the public safety of Arkansans.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Well, it seems we are at a bit of an impasse if we are not in agreement that your board owes us tribute.
Sir, maybe we could ask and see if there's a bureaucrat in the house.
Ah, yes. Yes, that would shed some light on things. A bureaucrat. Yeah, in the name of public safety, is there a bureaucrat in the house? We need someone to resuscitate and confirm our authority as the Arkansas State Licensing Board, governing state licensing boards.
Here.
Ah, yes. Oh, good. Come to the end of the table in the name of public safety and state your name for the record, please.
Yes, I am Despot Ringleader, the head of the bureau governing all state bureaus, and it is my testimony the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards does have the authority to demand tribute in this situation and will provide in exchange a license to say they can continue to operate in the name of public safety.
It's hard to argue when the public safety is put at risk. Very well. We will consider Mrs. Ringleader's testimony as truth, and we will pay tribute in the name of public safety, of course.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, coming up on the program, I want to talk a little bit about this article over at Talk Business and Politics about Mike Preston. Mike Preston is the head of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, which is a pretty sweet gig. Especially when everybody's convinced that the only way to get jobs here is to pay companies via corporate welfare to come here. Also, people seem to be convinced that communist China is somehow going to make Arkansas more prosperous. I'll talk about that next because he did an interview with Roby Brock at talkbusinessandpolitics.net, and we'll read for you next some of his quotes and give a little bit of an analysis about what's going on. I think most people I think there's a growing concern among our elected officials who are not necessarily in leadership about China and communist China in the context of the trade war, in the context of Central Intelligence Agency saying that what they're trying to do, the FBI saying that they've got investigations into Chinese businesses in all 50 states and what they're attempting to do, the intellectual property theft. All of these are things that if it were not for President Trump would not have been exposed thus far, and we'd have Chinese companies moving here faster than you could shake a stick at. And so there is a specific benefit to President Trump being in office for Arkansans, and that's because the governor had all these Chinese deals in the pipeline that were about to really just flood into the state. But, before we were able to pay the closing costs in what appears to really just be real estate transactions, President Trump started a trade war with China, and that slowed everything down. I'll talk more about that coming up at 7. Speaking of President Trump is now hunting for funds to pay for the border wall. That's one thing we really haven't talked about today. I was predicting a government shutdown. It still could happen. But President Trump is saying he doesn't have to have the $5 billion. He's backing off of this. He's presented some alternative solutions, and, of course, Chuck Schumer is now rejecting it, which I think is very interesting. So we may have a shutdown after all. President Trump saying he could find the funds elsewhere. He's asking his agency departments to find the funds elsewhere, and so far, according to reports, they think they've come up with an additional $600 million, not anywhere close to the $5 billion. But nobody is paying. They did reports like the mainstream media. President Trump says he'll use the military to build the wall and U.S. and Defense Department funds to do it. The media reports on it a few times, and then you don't hear anything else about it. You hear nothing else about it, and I just find it very interesting. And I'm telling you right now, I bet you that's what he's going to end up doing. And I know people are going to say, well, Paul, there's legal questions about it and this and that. The fact is, folks, there's a lot of money in the Department of Defense, and there's a ton of criminal activity and the violation of our sovereignty happening every single day. And so, absolutely, I think you could say, tell the military to go down there and build the wall and use our out of our defense budget, which is gargantuan, to do it. You can find $5 billion in the U.S. Defense Department budget like that. It's there. It's a lot of money they have. Anyway, tell me what you think on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. And I do want to say one more thing. When you go to find us digitally, please go to the YouTube channel and like or subscribe to it and click the little bell to receive notifications, because you never know how long Facebook is going to be here. And the reason I say that is because there's a new report out that says that Mark Zuckerberg gave Spotify and some other company I've never heard of the ability to look at your private messages on Facebook. And this, I'm telling you, this, and not to mention, Facebook is listening to everything we're saying. I'm broadcasting to a Facebook server near you. It's ridiculous. I mean, you say something random, and then all of a sudden you get an ad for it on Facebook. This is not a crazy phenomenon. It's happening all the time. So, anyway, we'll see what happens. I don't think we know yet the full extent of what Facebook is capable of, what they have been doing. We're going to be back in just a moment. One more hour of the program coming your way next. You don't want to miss the segment coming up at 7:33. We're talking with Dr. Warren Farrell. We're going to be talking about how technology, those screens that are in front of our faces, well, at least they're in front of our kids' faces, might be replacing the mother and the father in our society. We'll have more on that, too, next hour. Don't go anywhere.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
That would have shifted to other states if the count had been based solely on citizen population instead of all population.
Wow. So that would mean, obviously, California is a much more blue state, and so we would have maybe a few more. You just would be uncertain. You don't know if it would be a Democrat for Democrat, but if it moved to another state, it's not. California is a very, very, very different place than even the states around it.
Right. Yeah. It's California of that. 5 to 8 probably accounts for 3 to 5 of those seats, and it's estimated that one of those seats would probably go to Louisiana, one would probably go to Arkansas, one would probably go to North Carolina. So you're distributing seats in very different parts of the country, and what would the ultimate effect be? Not entirely clear, but certainly there would be some effect. So that's the concern. And then you have concerns. People have concerns about things like federal block granting. And Medicare, Medicaid, things like that are driven by population formulas, and there's the concern that states with high illegal populations are going to lose out if you're not counting illegals.
So I want to kind of park real quick on something you just said. I know it's speculative, but you're saying, this is an Arkansas radio program where we're based in Arkansas. We're on several stations across the state. So you're saying that theoretically, if the number of United States citizens is actually more, if it were more accurate and we had less illegal immigrants put in that category, that Arkansas might go from 4 congressional seats to 5?
Potentially. Potentially, based on, it's always hard to say in hindsight because, there's some fairly complicated formulas. But Arkansas and Louisiana were two states that a lot of people thought in the 2010 census probably lost out relative to California because of California's significant illegal population kind of juicing the numbers so that there were additional congressional districts.
Wow, that is big news here. Today on the program that it's even a possibility because I actually I knew there was the possibility that you've got going to have some districts moving, but I didn't know that there were people that actually thought that Arkansas might be affected by that. That would be huge. So where do we go from here? I mean, do you think? And I haven't followed this as closely as I should. I've got this NPR article, which, by the way, is I really don't ever reference NPR much at all. But do you think this is, gonna, when the census goes out, I mean, there's not been an injunction stopping the question, has there?
Well, there hasn't yet, but that's only because, we're still a little bit away from the census. But it is, the plaintiffs certainly are seeking an injunction, and the district court is going to issue an opinion. The district court in New York, which is the case that's furthest along, is probably going to issue an opinion here in the next, I would suspect, 2 to 4 weeks. The trial ended toward the end of November, and the judge said that he was likely to get an opinion out within about a month to 6 weeks. So okay. I think we're fairly close to an opinion. At the end of that, what's going to happen? Who knows? I think it is certainly very possible that judge will issue an injunction, at which case you're off to the races in terms of appellate court review in the Second Circuit. And I suspect this case will be heard on a relatively expedited manner up to the Supreme Court because, the Commerce Department and the Census Bureau have to have an answer, and they have to have an answer pretty soon. Census ballots, census forms have to be printed, and they have to be distributed. They have to be tested. So there's, this is not a ship that you can sort of turn on a dime.
Right.
But so I would expect we'll have an answer soon, and probably a definitive answer from the Supreme Court, certainly before the end of this term in June.
Good.
So I think we'll hear this question pretty quickly.
So, question: is this person a citizen of the United States? Yes, born in the United States. Yes, born in Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, or Northern Marianas. Yes, born abroad, U.S. citizen, parent or parents. Yes, U.S. citizen by naturalization, print year of naturalization. Or no, not a U.S. citizen. So here's my next question, Justin. We're talking with Justin Torres. He's a D.C.-based attorney. If this were to go forward, and let's
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome. Hour number 2. Thanks so much for being with us. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. I'm going to say something here. I go to a lot of Fox News articles. I mean, I read Fox News articles probably once a day. But I haven't actually been to the homepage of their website in a long time. And it looks really different and confusing. Especially some of the articles they're highlighting on here. Definitely some pop culture type stuff trying to get clicks. Interesting, though. Just interesting Interesting stuff going on. Anyway, hey, we got a great show for you. Great rest of the hour. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk about phones, screens, what they're doing to our kids' brains. We'll be talking with Dr. Warren Farrell, who's author of a book called The Boy Crisis, Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do to Help, or what we can do about it. Anyway, so tech is replacing the mother and father, and it may be thinning our cortex, maybe actually hurting our brains. Pretty interesting stuff. We'll talk about that coming up at 7:33. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. You don't have a lot of time left. I'll admit, I ordered a present yesterday, kind of like one of those, you know how you get a main present sometimes, and then maybe you want like a little something, a little small something. So I ordered, a sidekick present, I guess. And it does say it's going to get here by the 24th, and here's hoping that it does, because if it doesn't, it's not going to be very good. But just want to make sure everybody knows it's fast approaching. I want to talk just for a second about the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. The Arkansas Economic Development Commission was recently interviewed by Roby Brock over at talkbusiness.net, Talk Business and Politics. And I want to read some of his quotes here, because really we're talking about China. That's what I'm interested in. Talk Business and Politics, Roby Brock writes that a U.S.-China trade war has not helped Arkansas's recent successes of announcing 5 potential Chinese companies to locate operations in state. Mike Preston, the director of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, said it hasn't killed any projects, but it has slowed some down and put a pause button on potential new deals from the Asian economic giant. Okay, so all of us here in Arkansas need to be thankful and grateful for President Trump, because, folks, you have the CIA, you have the FBI, you have people, you have basically what's intellectual property theft, which I think we just need to start calling industrial espionage. Is what this really is from another country. And President Trump has pointed out that we're doing a lot of things that don't make sense. If President Trump hadn't been elected, and think about this for a second, if Hillary Clinton had been elected, Arkansas's economic developments, end quote, initiatives would be realized with the Chinese moving into Arkansas. Think about that for a second. Is that not wild? Is that not crazy? Why China? Why the communists? Someone tell me why. But here's what Mike Preston is quoted as saying in terms of the trade war. He says, quote, "It has not, I'd say, killed any projects. It's certainly slowed a couple of them down. They're waiting to see what happens with it. Other projects are still ongoing. It's maybe put a delay on them, but nothing is, I'd say, just killed because of that." Okay, that's interesting news. We have him saying that everything's, I guess what's crazy to me is that there hasn't even been a change in direction. And they're saying that things have been slowed down, but we're still basically we're still pursuing the Chinese, even though the American president is pretty much making it clear that China doesn't have, the best interests of America at heart here. And you can talk to other people that talk about their 100-year plan and everything else. This doesn't make any sense, especially when you look at what the vice president, Mike Pence, said about China. Something doesn't jive here, folks. Something's very, very strange. Why are we bending over backwards, holding on to the prospect of doing deals with Chinese companies? Mike Preston goes on, quote, "Some have been hindered," meaning the deals, "but we're continuing to work with the administration, work with our Chinese counterparts to make sure that these projects come to fruition. What it has done is our ability to recruit new projects from China into the state." So he's saying that it has hurt the idea of recruiting new projects. So we got 5 potential Chinese deals, and they want more. I mean, how many do they need? Why are we being sold out to the Chinese? It's an honest question. If we're going to do economic development via corporate welfare, fine. But why not give Kimberly-Clark some money? Why give it to the Chinese? The new NAFTA agreement, he goes on to talk about NAFTA and Mexico and everything else. Okay, so that's just wanted everybody to know what your government is doing in your name. And that's what they think needs to be done. Folks, I think there's people that are starting to ask questions, though. I do think our focus, Conduit News' is focused specifically on this issue over the last couple of months has been really enlightening, and I think it's woken a lot of people up because we're just asking questions. The question is, why China? Why China? Is this really the best we can do? It doesn't make any sense. Communist country, you're going to let them move here. You're going to give them all these tax incentives. You're going to let them use our resources to send the profits back home to make the communists. And look, there is no privacy in China. Okay, you see what they're doing to their citizens. You see what they're doing to churches. You see what they were doing to the underground church. Okay, do you see what they're doing with their new experimentation, their social media experimentation, or I'm sorry, their social credit score? A way to monitor their citizens. You have Google that partnered with China. Now Google says, no, we didn't. But we're not going to partner with China anymore. We promise. Huh? Interesting. I wonder what forced technology transfers China demanded on Google when they were supposedly thinking about working with each other, maybe working with each other. Actually, we're going to have more on that on Thursday. We got a guest coming on. We're going to talk about that, what the Google CEO had to say and everything last week. But the question is, why China? And, the realization I've had this morning is if Hillary Clinton would have beaten Donald Trump, we'd have a bunch of Chinese businesses in here. And I guess everything would have continued as normal. The status quo would have continued. Somehow it's acceptable to just ignore the fact that these Chinese companies are extensions of the communist government of China. And the truth of the matter is, as much as St. Francis County may want a Chinese factory, as much as Clark County may want, or I guess Arkadelphia, Arkadelphia, you really want this project. But I would ask you to think about these Chinese factories and these Chinese companies, not as companies, but as embassies. I think you need to think about them more in terms of embassies, because these companies are extensions of the communist government. They are communist. They call themselves a company, but they're really going to set up an embassy. You need to think about it in those terms. And for some reason, if we were doing business with Russian with Russian companies, I promise you, people would think more along the lines of, "Whoa, we're not going to let you set up an embassy here all over our state and then be able to meddle." What do you think China is doing? They're meddling as well. Why are we giving them our taxpayer dollars? And Kimberly-Clark is closing. Something is very, very strange. Something is very strange. Okay. So we got that going. Let's see what else. Do we want to take a break yet? Let's keep going here, all right? Because we got a few more things to cover. All of my articles are out of order, and here we go. Talked about the border wall. Oh, James Comey. Real quick, follow up on this James Comey situation. You have the former director of the FBI, James Comey, continues to falsely claim that Republicans were the initial backers of the Christopher Steele dossier. Now, we spent a little bit of time on this yesterday in the first hour, but I found this article, and I just wanted to highlight this. The Daily Caller, he has claimed throughout 2 recent congressional interviews that Republicans were the initial backers of the infamous Steele dossier, which alleges a vast conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. Comey claimed twice in an interview Monday with the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees that Republicans initially commissioned the work of Christopher Steele, the former British spy. He made similar claims twice more in an interview with the same committees on December 7th. He said this, quote, "I remember being told that Steele's work had been funded first by Republicans opposed to Trump, then Democrats opposed to Trump. It was Republicans opposed to Trump, and then it was Democrats opposed to Trump." Comey, who was fired on May 9th, made the same mistake in his interview earlier this month. He said the same thing. But to set the record clear, okay, later he believed that it was important for investigators to understand that the dossier was a politically motivated effort first by Republicans, then by Democrats. The Washington Free Beacon, a conservative website owned by Republican donor Paul Singer, paid Fusion GPS during the 2016 primary to investigate Trump. But executives with the website and with Fusion GPS have said that they discontinued with the Trump research effort after it became apparent that the real estate baron would win the GOP nomination. Fusion then went looking for a new client soon after to continue its investigation into Trump, and it found the law firm Perkins Coie. With the new client funding its anti-Trump effort, that's when Fusion GPS hired Christopher Steele. So, James Comey, I refer back to Congressman Rick Crawford on the program last Friday. He said, James Comey's got serious problems. Try to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's not the Boy Scout he pretends to be. And that's why he's come out now and he's been attacking so much. Now, I have a text message here on China, okay? Somebody bringing up the point here about the Clintons and how they, I guess, you got to remember, it was Bill Clinton that was certainly, well, I mean, there are allegations out there about selling technology, the Clintons selling technology to China a long, long time ago. Improper donations or campaign donations, really kind of the precursor to what we have seen now in the Clinton Foundation with all the whistleblowers and that sort of thing. So think about it like this. From what I can tell, Arkansas, in many ways, is still living in the shadow of the Clintons in a lot of ways. I mean, I know we've changed the color of our T-shirts from, blue to red, but we do have systematic corruption, the institutional corruption that just exists that almost put two Clintons in the White House. It started in Arkansas. They almost got two Clintons, not one. But, yeah, that's an interesting idea. This text message essentially bringing to mind that is the China situation, is this part of, a continuation of a Clinton mindset, of kind of a Chinese Clinton partnership, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours mindset? Is that still continuing now in Arkansas under the current leadership? You tell me. That's a good question. Who stands to benefit? That's the real question. Now, when it comes to this strategy of economic development, they're going to say, well, the people of Arkansas stand to benefit because of jobs, and more jobs. Well, we can debunk that argument all day long, okay? It's esoteric. Not a lot of people will understand it, but it's pretty elementary. We can't agree on the definitions of words and phrases. I keep saying this, but my definition of a job created would be if a guy is sitting on his couch right now before all of this economic development, and then after it, he's now at the plant working. So he didn't have a job, now he has a job. But that's not what happens here in Arkansas because we have a skilled labor crisis. And instead, the subsidized company gets to hire away current skilled labor at other Arkansas businesses at a more competitive rate, and so they leave. So if you got, and they would tell you this, I promise you they would tell you this because it's in their calculations. If you've got existing skilled workforce at factory A that's already existing, that's already profitable, that's already providing a job, and they go to factory B because of government incentives, the Chinese factories, coming in, and that's factory B, the government would tell you that a job just got created. We just created a job. That's not a job created. That's trading cards. That's just one person going from a job to another job. But they want you to think that person was on the couch. That person wasn't on the couch. It's not about the people, okay? It's not about the jobs. Not about the people. So, who stands to benefit? Why China? You got to take a break. Reset. Back in a minute. Say that there is a significant amount of, illegal immigrants that were counted before, and now we know that they're not being counted. Would anybody then compare that to the voter registration rolls, and would it maybe potentially reveal some massive voter fraud going on?
I mean, it's possible, right? One of the things I think that is driving this question is really it's very hard to formulate reasonable policy in the absence of data. And one of the things that's very clear is that there's a U.S. government official estimate of the number of illegal immigrants in the country, which is about 11 to 12 million. Anybody who studies this question on both sides of it, whether you're pro-illegal immigration or not, right, almost everybody agrees that estimate is really way too low. There was a Yale study that came out just a couple of weeks ago. Pretty sophisticated statistical analysis.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works, Obamacare, private option has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are two matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
This is one of my favorite stories this week because it highlights the self-destructive nature of the left. Do you realize that the Democrats and the establishment, media, the biased media, that they are the moral arbiters. They like to think of themselves as the moral standard setters of today. They are now saying that the Democrat Party cannot have a 2020 presidential ticket of two white men. And they are warning that this cannot happen. They are setting their standards. And some of the standards are, you got to at least have a woman on the ticket. If there's not a woman on the ticket, how could you? How could you? You got to have you got to have A person of color. Got to have a person of color on the ticket. You can't have two white men. I predict this will be their downfall. Well, think about what they're doing, aside from the fact that it's extremely discriminatory. I mean, it really, really is. Trying to set some sort of racial formula, because these people are obsessed with people. They want people to look different, but they want everybody to think the same. I mean, it's crazy. It's not diversity at all. Everybody think exactly the same, but we want you to look different. You can't be white, guys. Joy Reid of MSNBC, quote, "They can't run two white guys. The idea that you have Joe Biden talking to Beto O'Rourke and saying maybe they could be a ticket, I personally find it hard to understand how you get the requisite turnout among voters of color if it's a two-white male ticket," Reid told her guest. I mean, women are going to be outraged if there's not a woman on the ticket, and voters of color are going to say, well, then, why are we participating? Because voters of color can't rally behind an idea. They can only say, oh, well, you're the same color as me, so I need to go vote for you. How insulting is this? These people are really, really obsessed with race. They are obsessed with color. They are obsessed with the divisions. They think Americans walk around all day going like, well, this is my color, so I better identify with my color, and I better find other people of my color. Americans don't do that. Only neo-Marxists do that, and that's what we're in. We are in a state now to where you can't stand on the historical values of Marxism because it results in millions of people being killed by their own government. So instead, we're going to use class warfare. We're going to use gender. We're going to try to divide as many people as we can and then tell each group that they're a victim, and then there's your oppressor, and then you're a victim, and here's another oppressor, and the cycle continues, and it's new Marxism. And I would hope that most Americans would see a statement like that from Joy Reid and just think, this is just not what America stands for. This isn't what I was taught America stands for. Oh, you can't have two white guys. They're looking for a perfect racial formula that'll make everybody happy. It's crazy. It's like they literally want two candidates. The Democrats want two candidates. You want somebody who's part Native American, part Asian, part Mexican or Hispanic, part African American. Like, that's what they want. And then all of your boxes are checked, right? Is that really, that seems to be what the Democrat Party thinks is a winning ticket. Not ideas, but I don't know. It's, class warfare. Anyway, back in a minute.
He's probably going to issue an opinion here in the next, I would suspect, 2 to 4 weeks. The trial ended toward the end of November, and the judge said that he was likely to get an opinion out within about a month to 6 weeks. So okay. I think we're fairly close to an opinion. At the end of that, what's going to happen? Who knows? I think it is certainly very possible that judge will issue an injunction, at which case you're off to the races in terms of appellate court review in the Second Circuit. And I suspect this case will be heard on a relatively expedited manner up to the Supreme Court, because the Commerce Department and the Census Bureau have to have an answer, and they have to have an answer pretty soon. Census ballots, census forms have to be printed, and they have to be distributed, they have to be tested. So there's, this is not a ship that you can sort of turn on a dime.
Right.
But so I would expect we'll have an answer soon, and probably a definitive answer from the Supreme Court, certainly before the end of this term in June.
Good.
So I think we'll hear this question pretty quickly.
So, question, is this person a citizen of the United States? Yes, born in the United States. Yes, born in Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, or Northern Marianas. Yes, born abroad, U.S. citizen, parent or parents. Yes, U.S. citizen by naturalization, print year of naturalization. Or no, not a U.S. citizen. So here's my next question, Justin. We're talking with Justin Torres. He's a D.C.-based attorney. If this were to go forward, and let's say that there is a significant amount of illegal immigrants that were counted before, and now we know that they're not being counted, would anybody then compare that to the voter registration rolls, and would it maybe potentially reveal some massive voter fraud going on?
I mean, it's possible, right? One of the things I think that is driving this question is really it's very hard to formulate reasonable policy in the absence of data. And one of the things that's very clear is that there's a U.S. government official estimate of the number of illegal immigrants in the country, which is about 11 to 12 million. Anybody who studies this question on both sides of it, whether you're pro-illegal immigration or not, right, almost everybody agrees that that estimate is really way too low. There was a Yale study that came out just a couple of weeks ago using some pretty sophisticated statistical analysis that compared responses to the American Community Survey, which is a yearly survey that comes out from the Census Bureau to a subset of the American population. And
bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Thanks so much for starting the beginning of your day with us here, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we're building a liberty machine. You can find out more over at conduitnews.com. Click on store. You can get your Marble Palace mug, as well as there's a tumbler out there too now. So, okay. I want to welcome to the program. I want to introduce an author. He's the author of The Boy Crisis: Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It. His name is Dr. Warren Farrell. Dr. Farrell, welcome, sir.
I'm looking forward to being with you.
So, tell us a little bit about your book. What is this crisis that our young men are facing today?
Well, I guess about a dozen years ago or so, I was speaking around the world in one of my other books, and teachers in Japan and Australia and places like that would come up to me and they'd say, I'm having more problems with the boys in my class than I am my girls. And as I started doing the research on this for what became the boy crisis, I started seeing that this was not only true in the countries that I was happening to go to, but in all 63 of the largest developed nations, boys were falling behind girls in every single academic subject, and especially in reading and writing. And then I also saw they were far ahead of girls in suicides. That is, when boys and girls are 9 years of age, they commit suicide equally. When they're between 10 and 14, it goes to twice the number of boys that commit suicide as girls. Between 15 and 19, it's 4 times as often. And between 20 and 24, it's 5.5 times as often. And so after finding about 70 different areas where boys were doing worse than girls, I started to realize that this was, obviously, what was there about developed nations that was leading to boys falling so much farther behind in some place that was supposed to be more advanced. And I saw that there were 2 major factors. One was that the boy crisis basically resided where fathers did not reside, and they resided in divorced families. When the father, not all divorced families, but in divorced families where after divorce the father had minimal contact or no contact with the children, and they were involved among the families where the mothers were not married when they had a child. And in the United States, I was shocked to see that 53% of women under 30 have children without being married. And many of them say, well, I'm living with a man. What difference does it make? But even among the women who are living with a man when they have a child, those children remain involved with their father an average of only 3.5 to 4 years. And it's in that group of children where problems arise. But while they arise for the girls who have no father contact or minimal father contact, they're much more intense for the boys.
Wow. This is a confirmation of what I have definitely heard before, and that is that the traditional family structure. As it goes, so goes society, right?
I'm afraid this is the case. You can argue about the morality of being married versus not being married, but when you have children, the children do so much better when there is father involvement, as well as mother involvement, of course. But mother involvement is almost a given, unless the mother is a drug addict. But when there is father involvement, those children, girls and boys, do well. Girls, for example, are far less likely to become pregnant out of wedlock when they're teenagers, when they have father involvement. So in Baltimore, there was they studied children that were pregnant without being married as a teenager, and 30% of their children were also pregnant without being married. But among the ones that had father involvement, it went from 30% to 0%.
Wow.
And anyone that knows anything about social science research will tell you 0% negative behavior among human beings is almost unheard of.
That is incredible to me. But it's common sense. It's common sense that isn't. It's also not politically correct. But to say that, hey, if you have an intact family, specifically with women or young girls, their fathers are going to be protective of them when it comes to something like sex and the danger of getting pregnant out of wedlock. And it's almost as if men were made for that in a way.
Yes, and it's actually protected. What I discovered was that there's a number of different, what I would call dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting, and they're really both very helpful for children. So, for example, but most of us know that moms are nurturing, tend to be nurturing, and tend to be quite protective and cautious, and that's all accurate. But what very few people know is what dads contribute to, what dad-style parenting contributes to the health of the boys and the girls. And so, among the things that dads do differently is they're much more likely to enforce boundaries. So, for example, if the mom says, moms and dads will set boundaries the same way. They'll say, "Sweetie, you can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas." And kids will test boundaries the same way. They'll say, "Oh, okay, I had some more peas. Now could I have my ice cream?" And mom will say, "Well, I'll tell you what, you only had a few peas, but have 10 more peas, let's say, and then you can have your ice cream." And then the kid has 5 more peas, and mom thinks to herself, "Okay, I'm not going to get into a big argument over a few peas. Okay, you tried, thank you, you can have your ice cream." Dad will say, is much more likely to say, "Excuse me, we have a deal here. The deal here is finish peas. You can finish your peas and have the ice cream, or you cannot finish your peas and have the ice cream." And the kid goes, "Oh, you're so mean." And dad, is more likely to say something like, "Well, you can continue whining, and there'll be no more ice cream tomorrow night either." And so what the kid learns from the dad's method is that he has no choice but to finish the peas, and therefore. And with mom, the child learns to manipulate a better deal. And so the children raised predominantly by moms, 30% of them are likely to have ADHD. Children raised predominantly by dads, only 15% have ADHD. And you can see a reason from that example. The children raised by moms do not learn to focus on finishing their peas, so to speak. And the dads, the children raised by dads, are far more likely to focus their attention on doing what they need to do. That dynamic of boundary enforcement that dads are more likely to do sets up a dynamic of an outcome of postponed gratification. And postponed gratification is the single biggest predictor of success. And so,
wow.
And then with the girl that we're talking about before with the pregnancy, part of what happens with dads is, like dads and their children, girls and boys will tend to roughhouse a lot, and so the girls are getting a sense of how to be with a man on levels where of physicality without being sexual with the man, and so so the comfort level of girls with boys becomes much deeper and more nuanced, and so girls learn how to talk with boys and confront them and be confronted by them and be teased by them, and so on. And so when they're in the beginning of a relationship, they don't feel that the only thing they can do to be able to hold on to the boy is to be sexual with him.
Wow.
And they're also learning postponed gratification, which is, yes, I want to be physical, but maybe I need to hold off until it's the right time, the right boy, the right person.
Wow. We're talking with Dr. Warren Farrell. He's the author of a book that I'm sure many of you out there right now want to go and get. It's called The Boy Crisis, Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It. I want to talk here in a second about screen time and what these tablets and stuff are doing to our kids' brains. But before I do, I do want to say, Dr. Warren, do you feel frustrated at all that a lot of your research, the results that you're finding from these social studies, are not politically correct at all?
Yes, and you have hit the nail on the head in a deeper way, because my background is I was in the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City. I made my living. I was probably the best-known male feminist in the world, and so when I started finding things that were contrary to what the feminists were saying, I went from doing very, very well financially to going from like 50 speaking engagements per year down to 0 to 1 speaking engagement per year. So you can imagine how that affected both my fame and my finances. And so, but I decided to do the best I could to follow my research. And some of the research supported some of the things the feminists were saying, but a good portion of it, especially when it came to families and fathers, we were completely at odds. The feminists focus on the freedom for women. I don't want to go over break time, so I'll continue this after break.
Yeah, well, we're actually, we still got a lot of time. We're not going to break anytime soon. So.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the feminist perspective was, we want women to be free, to have free choice, and my response was, everybody wants, or at least I want, women to have freedom of choice. But when a woman makes a free choice to have a child, she makes a free choice to put her children's interests above her interests. And so you don't have a free choice to be irresponsible, to hurt somebody else's life. And when the research is crystal clear that children do so much better when fathers and mothers are both in their lives, and then we need to take on that responsibility with our free choice.
Wow. Again, the book is The Boy Crisis. The author is Dr. Warren Farrell. I have this story in front of me about the National Institute for Health study probes the impact of heavy screen time on young brains. I've been following this for a while. We are an Arkansas-based news program, and obviously here in Arkansas, we've got tablets and we've got phones. Other people may not think so, but we do. We've got them. And we're using them, and we're addicted to them, and our kids see us use them. And I guess I'm a new parent. I've got a 1.5-year old toddler, and it's my my life's really been changed radically. And what you were saying about boundaries completely identifies with both how my wife interacts and how I interact with her, and it's absolutely right. But tell me about these tablets and these phones. What are they doing to brain development?
Well, if a child has parents who are not good at the boundary enforcement, like you said, then there's a problem. I mean, some time on mobile phones is probably not too bad. A certain amount of time with video games is not bad, but with video games, boys are far more likely to be addicted to video games. The average video game playing, this is data from a few years ago, for boys is 15 hours a week. That's where it begins to start getting addictive. For girls, it's only 6 or 7 hours a week. When it comes to mobile phones, the average teenager now spends about 4.5 hours a day on his or her mobile phone. Girls and boys are about equal on that one. But the initial data from the NIH study that you're talking about shows that the amount of time that we're spending on the mobile phones, and this is just mobile phones alone, is leading to a premature thinning of the brain cortex. The brain cortex is the outermost layer of the brain, and that part of the brain is important for processing information, for thinking better, for being able to to judge and compare different outcomes, and also it's important for language, and so it's very important. But the solution to that problem is the boundary enforcement. Parents sometimes come up to me and they say, Dr. Farrell, how can we get we agree with you, but our son and our daughter, they come to the table with their cell phones and they don't want to give them up. Well, as soon as a parent says that to me, I know something. And what I know is that the children are in charge of the parent, not the parents are in charge of the children. And so the parents say, well, what can I do? And there's a lot of things you can do. You can just take the cell phone away. If that doesn't work, you can cut off the money that you're putting out to pay for the cell phone service. If that's a problem, if computer use is a problem, you can take the computer out of the room and put it into the living room where you can see what the child is doing on the computer. There's a huge amount of leverage that parents have, but they're so afraid of being not a good friend to their children or losing certain types of communication. But in fact, children have an enormous need for boundaries. It makes when children are without boundaries, it's like somebody being in the dark and not knowing what on a platform and not knowing where the end of that platform is. They're wanting to know what they can and they can't do, especially when it's in their self-interest.
And what I would also say to that is, if it's true that it's thinning the cortex of the brain, then that's harming your kids. And
yes, it is. It could be thought of as child abuse.
Yeah, so let that motivate you to, you're now we're talking about health consequences. So, and being able to process information, being able to critically think about stuff. I mean, you're really setting your kids up for failure here. And I say this as somebody who is, like I said, a new parent. And I could easily see myself in moments of frustration. Here, take this phone and entertain yourself because I'm just exhausted or whatever. I mean, it also is a discipline. It's an exercise in discipline on the parents as well.
Absolutely. It was started with TV when I was a kid. I have a 1.5-year-old grandson, so I guess I'm a little bit older than you are. And I remember when I was a kid, the challenge was, finally parents had a babysitter, sit them in front of the TV and we could watch that. And there was, there were problems with screen time there also. But now the data is very clear that children do not do as well when they have a lot of screen time, and especially boys who are addicted to video games and identifying with heroes. But there is a lot of ways around that. The one I was saying was boundary enforcement. Another important thing to remember is that the problem with the addiction to video games and to screen time is that it increases the dopamine, which is the feel-good drug of the child. And so everyday conversation does not increase the dopamine of the child as quickly. And so that's what creates the addiction process to, I want more feel-good drug, okay. Winning that video game or, calling my friend or responding to that text, that's something new. I've got to respond to it. And it's that immediate gratification. And it's that immediate gratification that is the predictor of not doing well. But not doing well is more than not doing well in school. When a child, especially a boy, does not do well in school, he begins to see the teachers praise other kids that do better. And when it comes to male-female time, girls don't want to date losers; they want to date winners. And so, if he can't, if he doesn't have that postponed gratification to be able to rehearse for the football team or the basketball team or for the play, or to do his homework, he's seen as a loser. So girls aren't interested in him. So he goes to porn because porn has access to a variety of attractive women without feeling rejected at a price he can afford, and so he starts getting addicted to things that addict him to more and more dopamine, and so increasingly the everyday conversation with a girl or just another person feels more boring, and so it becomes a vicious cycle of danger for the child.
Let me ask you this, and this has been a fascinating interview. We're talking again with Dr. Warren Farrell, author of the book, The Boy Crisis. When it comes to the crisis that our young men are in, does any of it have to do with economic opportunity in terms of use of our hands? I mean, a long time ago, men were using their hands. They were building stuff. They're just very physical with their labor. Those jobs are diminishing now. And then as far as development goes, our schools are cutting recess time. Where I remember I would run around when I was growing up till I was absolutely exhausted, just getting all that energy out. What factors come into play if you consider the reality of what I just said?
Yes, every single thing that you just said is right on target. So we're in a culture which is going from muscle to mental. And so when I was a kid, there were about 25% of the kids in the school were much more, oriented towards what we used to call shop and physical things, and most of them became mechanics, or they did something physical with their hands, or they, after they graduated, they didn't, if they graduated, and so there was a place for the non-academic boy in that physical labor. And in Japan, they recognize this. 25% of the students are in vocational education programs, and 99.6% of the graduates of the vocational education programs get jobs. Whereas in the United States, a lot of the non-academic boys drop out of high school, and among high school dropouts, more than 20% are unemployed in their early 20s. Now, unemployment is one thing, but for a boy who's unemployed, that means no woman falls in love with a boy on the unemployment line. So he not only has no job, he often has no girlfriend, or no girlfriend that wants him for anything but some quick sexual interaction if he happens to be tall and good looking. But ultimately, he's always rejected, and that sends a lot of boys into depression. And in worst-case scenarios, the suicide that I mentioned at the top of the program, becoming almost 6 times as great for boys as girls in their early 20s. And you can see all of this come together. But the two solutions on the more superficial level, but important ones, are the schools have to return to having significant, complex vocational education programs. When I say complex, I mean so, for example, welder is a physical job mostly, but to be a really top-notch welder, you have to know chemistry, you have to know physics, and boys can learn chemistry and physics even if they're not academic, if they have a goal. Boys are very much oriented toward goals. If they see the practical application of something they're learning in the relatively immediate future, they will sit down and they'll learn something that they will not learn if it's taught in a more abstract way without a goal involved in it. So vocational education, and then recess is important. The Centers for Disease Control have just come out with a study showing that when every minute spent at recess is actually more useful for studying for a test up to a certain point than studying for the test itself. So boys have to have a balance between they have to get rid of their physical energy, as you were just suggesting, before they're ready to settle down and focus.
Wow. Dr. Warren Farrell, author of the book, The Boy Crisis. We really appreciate you being with us, why our boys are struggling and what we can do about it. You have a Merry Christmas, sir, and I'd love to have you on again soon to talk about, the culture wars that we're a part of right now.
I'd be happy to. And between Farrell and Harrell, we'll do it together.
Okay, sounds good. Between Farrell and Harrell.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Folks, we got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine. and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It asked this question. It asked the citizenship question. So it compared those results to objective government data like Social Security registration and came up with an estimate of the illegal population that was twice the U.S. government's estimate. So their estimate was about 22 to 23 million. So it's pretty clear that we don't have a very good handle on what this number actually is, and that makes it hard to formulate all kinds of policies. How do you formulate any policy that is based on population if you don't have a really good sense of the population?
Mm-hmm.
It could have impacts in voter registration, enforcement issues, but all kinds of things. Block granting, as I mentioned, Medicaid, things like that.
Yeah, it goes to the very fundamental, concept of, what's prescribed in the Constitution and how to, get the right amount of representatives so we can govern ourselves. I mean, it's a big deal. It certainly is. And Justin, I just want to thank you for doing the work that you're doing on this and coming on the program.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. It is always great to have you guys out there listening. Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Folks, to recap on the show, we talked a little bit about what William Shatner has to say about the Me Too movement, which is quite a lot, actually. William Shatner wants to be able to tell women they have nice legs and it not be sexual harassment. We also had a segment with the Patriots of X746's John Calvin Martin. Definitely want to take a look at that. And, you just heard Dr. Warren Farrell on the program as well about how technology replacing the mother and father. Seems like a lot of stuff is replacing the mother and father. If we're talking about the mother and father as a cohesive, connected unit. Seems like the separating of the mother and father is bad for the family, and we're seeing the results of that now. That interview will be up at Conduit News here in just a little while. Arkansas, be safe. See you tomorrow.